When I was 19, my stepfather, Mark, forced me out of the house after being part of our lives for 5 years. Then, out of nowhere, my biological father, who vanished when I was 14, reached out and dropped a bombshell. My mother had been unfaithful with Mark, which was why he left. I'm 19 now, and this mess has been dragging on for far too long. I'm desperate for advice because I'm at a loss, and my mom always sides with Mark, no matter what goes down between us. Back when I was 14, my dad just disappeared one day. My mom told me he said he was done being a dad and wanted nothing to do with our family. At the time, I bought her story. How could I not when my own father left without a word? For about 2 weeks after he left, my mom was a wreck, crying constantly and saying things like, "How could he abandon us?" And, "We'll be okay without him." I was furious at my dad for breaking my mom's heart. She didn't deserve that. But then things got strange. After those 2 weeks, her tears dried up. She started going out more, getting her nails done, buying new outfits, and always texting someone with a smile on her face. It felt off to me. Shouldn't she be more heartbroken after her husband bailed? When I asked who she was texting, she said it was her cousin offering support during this tough time, but her cousin lived halfway across the country and they weren't even that close, so it didn't add up. A month after my dad left, my mom introduced me to Mark, a guy she said was a colleague helping with divorce paperwork. Mark seemed decent enough at first, but he was always at our house, eating meals with us, watching movies like he was part of the family. My mom said he was just being a good friend during a rough patch and that I should appreciate his help. I didn't think much of it because I was caught up in my own world, dealing with school and trying to make sense of my dad's disappearance. Then, one day, my mom sat me down and said she and Mark had grown close and developed feelings for each other. She explained that sometimes after something traumatic, people find solace in unexpected places, and Mark made her feel alive again after such a dark chapter. She announced they were officially dating and hoped I'd be okay with it because she deserved happiness after what my dad put her through. It felt way too sudden, but I wanted my mom to be happy, so I agreed. They got married just 4 months after my dad left, saying life was too short to wait when you found the right person. Mark moved in, and everything changed. This stranger was now in my dad's space, sleeping in his bed, sitting at his spot at the table. My mom seemed thrilled, always giggling at Mark's jokes, clinging to him, calling him dear and love. She kept saying how fortunate she was to find someone who treated her right after my dad's betrayal. At first, Mark was kind to me. He'd ask about school, offer to help with assignments, and even took me to a football game once. My mom said it was great to finally have a positive male role model since my dad had clearly failed at that. But once they were married and he settled in, Mark's attitude shifted. He started saying I needed to pull my weight around the house since I was old enough to take on responsibilities. He gave me chores and strict rules my mom never had, like a 9 p.m. curfew on school nights, 10 p.m. on weekends, needing permission to have friends over and keeping my room immaculate because a messy space showed disrespect for the household. My mom backed him up saying Mark was right that I needed more discipline since my dad never taught me any. When I pushed back, she said I should be thankful Mark cared enough to set boundaries for my future. As I got older, things with Mark got worse. He started acting like I was a burden, making snide remarks about how I ate too much, used too much water, or left lights on, wasting electricity. He'd question every little thing, why I needed new shoes or school supplies, and say that when he was my age, he worked for everything he had and suggested I get a job if I wanted extras. My mom always defended him, saying he was teaching me the value of hard work and that I was being ungrateful. Mark's constant criticism made me feel like an outsider in my own home, so I started spending more time at my friend Ethan's place, where his family treated me like I belonged. When I turned 18, Mark sat me down and said that as an adult, I needed to start paying my way or make plans to leave. He said it wasn't fair for me to live rent-free when others my age were independent or in college. I explained I was planning to attend community college and work part-time, but needed time to save up. He gave me until my 19th birthday to either pay rent or move out. My mom was there and agreed with him, saying most parents would have kicked me out already and that this was a wake-up call to get serious about my future. I was stunned. I argued that this was my home too, and I shouldn't have to pay to live where I grew up. Mark shot back that it was his and my mom's house now, and I was an overstaying guest. I lost it, yelling that he wasn't my dad and had no right to kick me out, that he was just some guy who waltzed in and took over. Mark shouted that I was an ungrateful kid with no respect for authority, and that my bad attitude was probably why my real dad left. My mom started sobbing, begging us to stop fighting, saying she couldn't handle the tension in her home. She told me to apologize to Mark for being disrespectful, claiming he was just trying to make me independent. I refused to apologize, saying Mark was the one being unfair by trying to force me out. My mom said if I couldn't respect her husband, maybe I did need to find somewhere else to live. I was floored that my own mother was choosing this man over me. I told her so, and she said she wasn't choosing sides but couldn't let me undermine Mark's authority, as it was straining their marriage. She said Mark had been good to us, and he deserved better than my attitude. With my 19th birthday 2 months away, Mark kept reminding me to start looking for a place or roommates, acting like it was perfectly normal. My mom went along with it, as if it was no big deal. I work part-time, but my income barely covers basics like gas and food. There's no way I could afford rent and bills. Most of my friends are heading to college, so I had no one to room with. I felt like my own family was pushing me out, and I couldn't understand why my mom was okay with it when Mark was just some guy she married after barely knowing him. I wondered if I should try talking to my mom alone to see if she'd see reason or just accept that this was my reality and start planning to leave. I love my mom, but she's changed since marrying Mark, and it feels like she cares more about keeping him happy than what happens to me. Am I wrong for thinking I should be able to stay in my family home while I figure out my life? Or is Mark right that I need to be on my own now that I'm 18? I'm losing my family and I don't know what to do. Update. A few weeks ago, I shared how my stepfather Mark was pushing me to move out by my 19th birthday. Many suggested I talk to my mom alone to sort things out, so I decided to give it a shot before giving up on her completely. I waited for a day when Mark would be working late and asked my mom for a serious talk about the move-out situation. I told her I felt like she was picking Mark over me and that it hurt to be pushed out of the home I grew up in. I said I understood Mark was her husband, but I was her son, and that should mean something. I asked if she thought it was fair to make me leave when I was still navigating college and life. My mom got defensive, accusing me of manipulating her by forcing her to choose between her son and her husband. She said Mark's demand wasn't unreasonable. Most parents expect their kids to be independent by 19. She claimed I'd had enough time to prepare and was just whining instead of planning, and she said maybe my dad was right that I needed to learn responsibility. Confused, I asked what she meant. She said my dad always thought I was too coddled, expecting things to be handed to me, and that Mark was just continuing the job of raising me that my dad started but never finished. I pointed out how strange that was, given that my dad supposedly abandoned us, leaving her to raise me alone. She snapped, saying he didn't abandon us. He chose to leave because he couldn't handle our family's stress. Just then, Mark came home early and overheard us. He asked what was happening, and my mom told him I was guilt-tripping her into letting me stay past my birthday without contributing. Mark said he was done rehashing this, that we'd settled it weeks ago, and I needed to accept that adults don't live with their parents for free. I said I wasn't asking for a free ride forever, just more time to save up and get stable. Mark insisted he'd given me enough time, and that he and my mom deserved their own space without a grown man in their house. He said when he was my age, he was self-sufficient and didn't have parents making excuses for him, and my inability to be independent showed my parents had failed me. I got heated and said he had no right to talk about my parents failing when he wasn't even my dad and had only been around a few years. I accused him of wanting to get rid of me to have my mom to himself. Mark called me delusional, saying this wasn't about wanting my mom to himself. They were married adults who didn't need to care about a teenager's opinion of their relationship. He said I was just mad because I couldn't manipulate my mom anymore with another adult in the house who wouldn't tolerate my behavior. My mom started crying, saying she couldn't take all this fighting and stress. She was tired of feeling torn between the two most important men in her life. Then Mark issued an ultimatum. I had 2 weeks to find a new place, birthday or not. If I stayed, he'd charge me $800 a month for rent plus utilities, knowing I couldn't afford it. He said this was final, no discussion, because he was done with my disrespect. My mom looked at me, then at Mark, and said 2 weeks was fair, and that this had gone on too long, stressing their marriage. She said she had to support her husband's decision because that's what married couples do, and I'd understand when I was older and married. I asked if she was really kicking out her son for a guy she'd known for 5 years. She said Mark wasn't just some guy, he was her husband, who'd supported us financially since my dad left us with nothing. She claimed Mark had been a better father than my real dad, and I should be grateful instead of treating him like the enemy. I said Mark had only made my life miserable and controlled everything. And Mark shot back that he'd provided for me for 5 years, and I was the most ungrateful person he'd ever met. He said my mom deserved better than dealing with a stepson who couldn't respect the man who saved our family from financial ruin. I asked my mom if she really believed Mark saved us, and she said yes, he'd been there when my dad left us with nothing, and I needed to appreciate that. She said Mark didn't have to take on raising another man's kid, but did it out of love for her, and I should show gratitude instead of causing trouble. I called my friend Ethan and asked if I could crash with his family. He checked with his parents, who said yes, so I packed my stuff and left that night. I wasn't going to stay and hear more about how I was a burden. Ethan's parents are amazing. They said I could stay as long as I needed to get on my feet, only asking me to chip in for groceries and help with chores. which felt way fairer than Mark's demands. My mom texted a few times, saying she hoped I was okay and loved me, but thought this was for the best, and maybe time apart would give us perspective. She said the door was open if I wanted to come back and apologize to Mark to work things out as a family. But I'm never apologizing for wanting to stay in my own home. Ethan's mom asked if I had other family to reach out to, and I mentioned my dad but said I had no way to contact him since he left when I was 14. She suggested trying to find him for answers about why he left. I'm torn because what if he really did abandon us like my mom said? But maybe it's worth a try since my mom clearly doesn't want me around. This whole situation is wild, and I can't believe my mom chose Mark over me. But Ethan's family is treating me like a person, not a problem they want gone. I'm working and saving up, hoping to get my own place soon, but for now, I'm just thankful for a safe place to stay. Update 2. This is going to sound unbelievable, but my dad called me a few days ago. First time in years since he left when I was 14. I was at Ethan's doing schoolwork when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a man's voice said my name, asked if it was me, and I said, "Yes, who's this?" He said, "It's your father," and that he knew I probably didn't want to talk, but had things I deserved to know. I almost hung up, thinking it was a prank, but his voice felt familiar despite the years. He said he knew I likely hated him for leaving, and that my mom probably told me he abandoned our family. He didn't blame me for feeling that way since it looked like he'd vanished without a reason. He said he'd been wanting to reach out for years but wasn't sure if I'd want to hear from him or if my mom would allow it. He decided to call after hearing through old friends that I was having issues at home. I asked how he knew, and he said he still had contacts in our old neighborhood who kept him updated about me and my mom. One mentioned that my mom's new husband was trying to push me out. He said he couldn't stay quiet anymore. He didn't want me thinking he'd abandoned me when the truth was far more complex. Then he dropped a bombshell that turned my stomach. He left not because he didn't want to be a dad, but because my mom was having an affair with Mark for months before he found out. He said he came home early one day and caught my mom and Mark together in their room. When he confronted her, she admitted she loved Mark and wanted a divorce. She begged him not to tell me the truth, saying it would be better for me to think he'd chosen to leave rather than know she'd cheated. He said he was so hurt and angry that he agreed to her story, thinking it might be easier for me to see him as the bad guy than to know my mom had wrecked our family. He regretted it every day since, knowing I probably thought he was a deadbeat dad. But at the time, he was too broken by her betrayal to think straight. He moved to another state to start over but never stopped thinking about me. He planned to reach out when I turned 18 but kept delaying, fearing I'd reject him. I asked if he was being honest or just trying to make himself look better after ditching us. He understood my skepticism and said he had proof, emails and texts from that time showing what happened. He said after he left, my mom and Mark got together almost immediately, planning to marry as soon as the divorce was final, and the timeline proved they'd been involved long before he left. It clicked. My mom's quick recovery, her sudden happiness, the way she moved on so fast with Mark. She wasn't heartbroken. She was already with someone else. I realized Mark wasn't the hero who saved my mom after a bad breakup. He was the guy who tore our family apart and then stepped into my dad's place. I asked why he didn't fight for custody or visitation. He said my mom threatened to make it ugly in court, claiming she'd tell everyone, including me, that he was an abusive husband and father, ensuring I'd never want to see him. He said she convinced him a custody battle would hurt me more than help, and that I'd be better off in a stable home with her and Mark. He thought stepping back would make me happier, but he now saw that was a huge mistake. He'd been following my social media from afar and could tell I wasn't happy. When he heard Mark was kicking me out, he realized his plan to stay away for my sake had failed. He said it was clear Mark never wanted me around, just tolerated me until he could get rid of me. He couldn't stand by while Mark treated me like an unwanted guest when I was his son and deserved better. I asked if he wanted to see me, and he said he'd been hoping I'd ask because he missed me every day and wanted to rebuild our relationship. He understood if I needed time to process and didn't expect instant forgiveness, but leaving me was his biggest regret, and he'd do anything to make it right. I told him I was staying with Ethan's family because my mom and Mark kicked me out. He was furious, saying he couldn't believe my mom let Mark throw me out after everything. He said she shouldn't be choosing her affair partner over her son. He gave me his contact info, Facebook, address, number, and said to call anytime. He offered to have me visit or even live with him if I wanted. He has a house with a spare room and said he'd help with college and getting my life on track, ready to be the dad I deserved. I'm so confused and angry. My whole life feels like a lie. My mom's been deceiving me for 5 years about why my dad left, and Mark wasn't the savior but the guy who ruined my family. Ethan's parents think I should meet my dad to hear his side and give him a chance to make things right. They said it sounds like my mom's been manipulating me to cover her mistakes and that Mark likely sees me as a reminder of the family he helped break. Final update. 2 weeks ago, I met my dad, and we spent the whole day talking about what happened 5 years ago and how my life has been since he left. It was emotional. He genuinely regretted leaving and felt awful for missing so much of my life. He showed me proof of my mom's affair with Mark, text screenshots where she told Mark she loved him and couldn't wait to start their life together, including messages from before my dad left, discussing how to keep their relationship secret until they could sort things out. The most shocking was a text from my mom to Mark right after my dad moved out saying she was relieved they could finally be together openly and that she thought I'd quickly adapt to Mark as my new father figure. Another text showed Mark expressing doubts about raising another man's kid, with my mom reassuring him I was a good kid who wouldn't cause trouble and would eventually see him as a dad. Reading these felt surreal, knowing they'd planned this while I was a clueless 14-year-old. It explained why Mark always treated me like a burden. He never wanted me around but pretended for my mom's sake. My dad apologized repeatedly for leaving me with them, saying he should have fought harder for custody. He revealed he'd been paying child support the whole time, despite my mom claiming he never sent a dime. He showed bank records proving he'd sent over $40,000 over 5 years. I was stunned. My mom lied about that too, making me think my dad was a deadbeat when he'd been supporting me all along. He said he'd asked my mom if he could send me birthday and Christmas gifts directly, but she refused, saying it would confuse me and that it was better for me to think the gifts came from her and Mark for a normal family experience. Then he shared something else that blew my mind. When his father passed 3 years ago, he inherited a sizable trust fund, about $300,000, which he'd planned to use for my college and future. He'd been waiting until I was 18 to reach out and help me financially, to make up for lost time. He'd already consulted a lawyer to set up an education fund to cover college and living expenses, and he offered to buy me a car and help me get an apartment if I wanted. He said money couldn't replace the years we lost, but he wanted to ensure I had every chance to succeed without financial stress. I told Ethan's parents about meeting my dad and the trust fund, wanting them to know I'd soon contribute more to their household. Ethan's mom was thrilled but cautioned me to be careful who I told about the money, as it can change how people treat you. She was right. Somehow, word got back to my mom and Mark, likely because Ethan mentioned it to someone at college who knew people from my old neighborhood. I don't blame Ethan. He was probably just excited for me and didn't think it would spread. Then my mom called for the first time since I left, suddenly acting worried about me, saying she missed me and wanted to fix things. She said she'd reflected on our last fight and thought Mark was too harsh with the move-out deadline. She suggested we sit down to find a way to make the living situation work for everyone, calling our conflict a minor disagreement. I asked what changed, and she said friends and family made her realize kicking out her son was extreme. Then Mark got on the phone, apologizing for being too strict, blaming work stress for taking it out on me. He said he realized I was young and figuring things out, and he'd let me move back home without rent or deadlines if I wanted to give our family another try. This was absurd. Weeks ago, Mark called me ungrateful and disrespectful, done with my attitude. But now he was acting like he cared about me. My mom said she missed me, that the house felt empty without me, and that Mark felt guilty about how things ended. She said family was everything, and she didn't want a misunderstanding to tear us apart. Mark added he'd been thinking about helping with college and my goals, offering to guide me with financial planning since he had experience, saying family should support each other during big life changes. It was so obvious they'd heard about the trust fund and saw me as a potential cash cow. I told my mom I'd think about it, but was happy with Ethan's family for now. She said she understood, but hoped I wouldn't wait too long to come home, warning that Ethan's parents, while nice, didn't love me like she did and might tire of me. Mark jumped in, saying he wanted to help ensure I had what I needed to succeed. I nearly laughed at how transparent they were, but said I'd consider moving back. I called my dad after and told him about it. He wasn't surprised, saying my mom was always good at twisting situations to her benefit, and Mark likely saw a chance to get in my good graces for the money. He warned they might try to guilt me into helping with household costs or accessing the trust fund. I'm definitely not moving back with them. Their fake apologies and sudden concern only came after they learned about the money. They were fine kicking me out when they thought I was broke, but now they're acting like caring family. My dad's been incredible, helping me look for an apartment near college for my own space and independence. He's ensuring the trust fund is protected so my mom and Mark can't touch it. He said he learned his lesson about trusting my mom and won't let her manipulate things again. I'm grateful this all happened. It exposed my mom and Mark's true colors and let me reconnect with my dad, who's shown he truly cares. I'm focused on building a relationship with him and keeping my distance from my mom and Mark until they prove they can be trusted, which I doubt they ever will.